All right, what's up? I'm the last one. You guys, you're almost home. You're just gonna sit through this. Okay, so today I'm going to be telling you guys about a tattoo, one of my tattoos. Just a little bit about what it means to me, I guess, you know, the story leading up to it, and why I thought it was so important that I needed to have it on my skin for the rest of my life, right? So I'll show it to you real quick. It's actually a pink butterfly right here on my lower... What? Why's that funny? Okay, it's not a pink butterfly. I don't have it, let the record show I do not have a tattoo on my lower back. I was kidding about that, but I wasn't kidding about the tattoo thing. I'm actually going to be talking about this little tattoo right here on my wrist. I know you guys can't see that, but what it is just a little bit of text. And it says, if you're not lost, ... Just 4 words, if you're not lost. I'll get back to that in a few minutes, but first, I was told that there are a lot of high schoolers in the audience today, some college students, so I think it's probably safe to assume that this is a familiar question to you. I know when I was your guys' age, I heard this question all the time, and to be completely honest, I hated this question. I hated it. I felt nothing but stress when people would ask me this, you know? A little bit of background about me. I grew up in a small rural town in North Idaho, just below the Canada border. And I grew up, I had summer jobs working on farms my whole life, that kind of thing. And so after high school, I did not go to college. I went into construction. And that's because that's what was expected of me. Most of the people from my area, in fact. Your situation might be different than mine. But one thing I've learned since then, in all my travels, is that no matter who you are, no matter where you're from, we all have noise from society, from the media, from the people around us, from our own families sometimes, that's telling us what we're supposed to be doing and, you know, who we're supposed to be. Some people are being told, you know, you have to be a doctor. That's your only option. And then there's other people who are told, you could never be a doctor, even if you wanted to. You know, you couldn't pull it off. The messaging isn't what's important. The point is that we're all getting that messaging, right? You know, from the day we're born, basically, each one of us is set on one assembly line or another. So, I was on track to be a construction worker. And I remember thinking, this is crazy that people are making me choose what I'm going to do for the rest of my life right now. Because at that time, at that age, I didn't even feel like I knew myself yet. So, I kind of freaked out, and I left. I left Idaho, I left construction, and so began a period of my life where, to be completely honest with you guys, I was really lost for a good chunk of time. I had no idea where I was going. And I'm here today to tell you that if any part of you feels the way that I did back then, or if any part of you feels the way that I used to feel about this question, it's okay. Like, first of all, that's completely okay. Not only is it okay, but I think that's how you should feel. And for those of you who are right now thinking, well, I actually know exactly what I'm going to do with my life. Believe it or not, I'm hoping to make you rethink that a little bit today. You see, this question became like a driving force for me. I ended up hitting the road in an RV. In case you guys were wondering why there's a picture of an RV on this slide, it's because that became my home on wheels. And on and off throughout the years, for the last decade actually, I've been traveling the country filming this TV show called Roadtrip Nation. And we're not just seeing the sights, even though that's definitely part of it. We're also conducting interviews, hundreds and hundreds, and actually collectively now thousands of interviews with people from all walks of life, and asking them these questions that have been burning inside us. You know, like, where were you at when you were our age? What were you thinking? What were you feeling? You know, were you ever scared? Were you ever unsure? How did you get through that? What does it actually take to build a life around doing the things that you love? So you can imagine I've heard a lot of incredible stories. I've heard a lot of advice. But there's one big lesson that I want to pass on to all you guys today, and that's this. In order to find yourself, you need to get lost. What do I mean by that? Well, this idea was first planted in my head by a woman named Britton Heller. She's an international human rights lawyer here in DC, actually. So years ago, I was road tripping through your guys' area, sat down with her, and she explained that in her mind, there's kind of 2 approaches you could take to building a life for yourself. The first one, she said, is called the paint by numbers approach. So in this, you're kind of given the outline of a picture, like a flower pot or something, right? And you follow the instructions. You put the blues here and the reds there. The real life example of this would be like building the right resume, going to the right school, taking the right classes, you know, getting that job that you set out to get. She called that like the paint by numbers approach to life. The other approach that she talked about, though, she called connect the dots. And with this, you start out with just one idea, like one thing you're interested in, and you take one step towards that thing. Then you learn a little bit more about that thing, you learn a little bit more about yourself, and then you kind of reassess, like what is your next option? You take one more logical step from there, connect one more dot. And one dot at a time, you keep connecting. The important thing about this is that if you guys have ever seen a connect the dots, like in a coloring book, you don't know what it's going to be at the beginning, right? It just looks like a mess. Like the real life example of this is that sometimes it takes years of connecting one dot at a time before you realize what you've been drawing this whole time. So, yeah. Oh, thank you. It's not my words, I heard this in an interview, but thank you. See, I think that in order to find who you truly are at the core, and in order to build a life around that thing, you have to kind of reject the idea that you know what your big picture is going to look like. You kind of have to get lost in the process a little bit. There's that word again, lost. I keep using that word. I think you know at this point that I'm talking about it figuratively, right? Let me elaborate. I read this metaphor from a guy named Michael Smithson. He's a social scientist, professor, and he said, imagine everything you know is an island. And as you learn more, that island grows a little bit. You learn more, it grows, etc., etc. And as that island gets bigger and bigger, you'll notice that the coastline of that island is getting longer and longer every time, right? That coastline, where land meets water, that's where your knowledge meets the unknown. Albert Einstein was quoted saying, the more I learn, the more I realize that I don't know. So the bigger your knowledge island gets, the more you're going to realize that there's more to learn. But this shouldn't be a discouraging thought, because if you think about what that's really saying, what it's saying is that the more you get outside of those safe, known pathways in your mind, the more it's going to keep expanding your mind. The more new questions you're going to now know to ask. So if you get outside of those ruts and you explore, in a sense, if you stay in that precipice where you might feel a little bit lost, I guess if you're not lost, then in a sense you kind of stop growing, right? You might be getting a picture at this point of what this tattoo means to me if you're not lost. Well, we all want to be prepared for the real world, right? Like whatever that means, the real world, big air quotes. Because, I don't know, when I was your guys' age, I remember people use this term all the time, like you're about to go into I was like, well, what have I been living in for like 18 years? I don't know. Anyways, I was road tripping through Boston, and we sat down with this guy, Juan Enriquez. He's a futurist. That's an actual job, which is kind of crazy. This is somebody who studies the intersections of like economics and technology and sociology and all these things. And he predicts the trends of the future. So we sat down with him and said, you know, we don't know what we're going to do with our lives. And he said, well, yeah, of course you don't, because the jobs you're going to be doing 10 to 15 years from now, they don't even exist yet. There was a whole talk about this earlier today, right? Talking about how the world's going to actually be a totally different place by the time you all graduate from college. So think about that paint by numbers approach. Think about choosing a job today and aiming for that thing. That's actually a very narrowing, very limiting approach to life, isn't it? Because that'll prepare you for one thing and one thing only, that job. Whereas if the real world, or whatever you want to call it, this futurist was telling us, if it's anything, it's constantly changing. So isn't it our responsibility to continue exploring and evolving with it so that we're ready to take on these new opportunities as they arise? Take me as an example. I am a professional road tripper. So I'm a filmmaker and I'm all these things, but can you imagine me back in high school in Idaho, someone's like, what are you going to do with your life? And I was like, I want to be a professional road tripper. It wouldn't work. They wouldn't know what to do with me. And that's because, well, first of all, I didn't know that's what I wanted to do. And I didn't know that's what I wanted to do because I didn't know that was even an option for me. But to be fair, for me, I didn't know that was an option because it wasn't an option. This didn't used to be a thing. I actually invented this. I think I'm the first person with this job title, I'm pretty sure. Which brings me to my next point. I spoke with a guy named Jeff Johnson. He's a host on BET. He's a political activist, awesome guy. And he explained it to me this way. He said, no one's ever looked at the person who followed the instruction manual perfectly and said, oh my God, the way you followed that manual was just inspiring. Like, nobody's ever said that. Because it's the people who throw the manual away that shape the world. Those of you who walk out of this room today and begin confidently saying, I don't know what I'm going to do with my life. You are the ones who are going to change the world. You're the ones who are going to drive innovation. I told you I'd be talking about this tattoo on my arm, right? If you're not lost. Well, it came from a conversation I had one day. I was road tripping through Northern California. This is the area where they have those big giant redwood trees. It kind of looks like the planet Endor for any Star Wars nerds out there. No, not here today. Okay, that's fine. Anyways, I was road tripping through Endor, or Northern California, and we came to this guy's house, J.P. Barlow, and just brilliant guy. And I remember just explaining how lost I felt in the world. You have to remember, when I first left Idaho and I began road tripping around, I had no idea where any of this would lead, and it was terrifying. Like, it was so scary for so long. I was panicking, honestly. Because nobody could have expected that one day I would direct a TV show, or co-author a best-selling book, or make music. I make music videos now for some of my favorite artists. I'm an artist myself. I'm actually an Etch-a-Sketch artist. Believe it or not, that's I've been paid to make Etch-a-Sketch art, so I'm actually a professional Etch-a-Sketch artist, technically. It's kind of crazy. Anyways, nobody could have expected that I'd be doing any of these things, because once I stepped off of that assembly line that I was on, there was no blueprint for the life that I was building now. And so that's why I got this tattoo on my arm, to remind myself that it was getting lost that led me to being here on this stage today. And it will be staying lost, in a sense, that's going to lead me to the next version of myself. So what I want to urge all of you guys is to just reject the idea that you already know what your big picture is going to be. Like, reject the idea that you already know what you're capable of. You need to silence the voices, all the external voices and the internal voices that are telling you what you're capable of, that are stopping you from exploring untapped talents. Because beneath your surface right now, I guarantee, there are dormant parts of you that are just waiting to be unearthed. So these words, if you're not lost, I guess literally they came from the last thing that this guy said to us that day. He just kind of smiled and he said, I figure if you're not lost, then you're not much of an explorer. And I didn't feel like getting the whole thing all the way up my arm, so I just got it if you're not lost, but I figured I was good enough. That's my time. Thank you guys for listening.